Welcome everyone. So today I'm going to do the probable question that we might see in Solution Architect Associate examination, and this is part 5. So if you haven't gone through the earlier sections, that is part 1 to part 4, you can go through my channel and look through it. So let's go ahead and get it started. And one more thing, I'll be linking the document in the description below, as well as I'll provide the link for the Facebook group where you can go ahead and ask some question if you have any doubt, and someone will be there to answer your question as well. Okay, so let's get it started. A customer needs corporate IT governance and cost oversight of all AWS resources consumed by its divisions. Each division has its own AWS account, and there is a need to ensure that the security policies are kept in place at account level. How can you achieve this? So you need to keep in place that security policies are kept at the account level. Such things can be done with AWS organizations and with service control policies. It is also known as SCPs, service control policies. So SCPs allows you to define which AWS service API can and cannot be executed by AWS IAM entries. Okay. So moving to next question. A company is planning on migrating their infrastructure to AWS. For the data stores, the company does not want to manage the underlying infrastructure. Which of the following would be ideal for the scenario? So, for migrating the infrastructure to AWS, right? We have the scenario that the company does not want to manage the underlying infrastructure. So if the company doesn't want to manage the underlying infrastructure, we have the managed service in AWS. So that is S3 and DynamoDB, right? We can use this. And moving to next question. Your company has a set of resources defined in AWS. These resources consist of applications hosted on EC2 instances. Data is stored on EBS volumes and S3. The company mandates that all data should be encrypted at rest. How can you achieve this? So if you want the scenario where all data should be encrypted at rest, then you should enable EBS volumes, right? You should enable the EBS encryption, and you should also enable the S3 server side encryption, right? So these two are the criteria where you can achieve the encryption at rest, right? That is, you need to enable EBS encryption and you need to enable S3 server side encryption. So moving to next question. Your company has a set of VPCs. There is now a requirement to establish communication across the instances in the VPCs. Your supervisor has asked you to implement the VPC peering connection. Which of the following consideration would you keep in mind for VPC peering? So the things that you need to consider for VPC peering is you need to ensure that the VPC don't have overlapping CIDR blocks, and you need to also ensure that no on-premise communication is required via transitive routing, right? So you should not require any on-premise communication through transitive routing. So these two are the considerations that you need to keep in mind for VPC peering. So moving to next question. You have been instructed to establish a successful site-to-site VPN connection from your on-premise network to the VPC. As an architect, which of the following prerequisites should you ensure are in place for establishing the site-to-site VPN connection. So that is a public IP address on customer gateway for on-premise network and a virtual private gateway attached to VPC. Right? Let's go through the question again. It says you have been instructed to establish a successful site-to-site VPN connection from your on-premise to VPC. So as an architect, right, which of the following prerequisites should you ensure are in place for establishing site-to-site VPN connection? So to enable or to make sure for the site-to-site VPN connection, you need to identify these things, that is a public IP address on customer gateway and a virtual private gateway attached to the VPC. Right? Okay, let's move to next question. Your company wants to enable encryption of services such as S3 and EBS volumes so that data it maintains is encrypted at rest. They want to have complete control over the keys and the entire life cycle around the keys. How can you accomplish this? See, you want to have complete control over the keys, right? Over the entire life cycle around the keys. So this can be done, right? This type of encryption can be done with the help of HSM module, right? So what is HSM module? It is the cloud-based hardware system module, HSM, that enables you to easily generate and use your own encryption, right? So moving to next question. A company has set up some EC2 instances in VPC with the default security group and NACL settings. They want to ensure that IT administrator staff can connect to the EC2 instances via SSH. As an architect, what would you ask the IT administrator team to do to ensure that they cannot what would you ask to IT administrator team to do to ensure that they cannot do the EC2 instances from internet, right? So this is, they can access EC2 instances through the internet, right? So you can, to access EC2 instance through the internet, you need to ensure that the instances has a public or elastic IP, and you need to ensure to modify the security groups, right? So in this scenario, this is the scenario where your instances cannot connect via SSH and you want to have EC2 instance connect through the internet. Then either it should have public or elastic IP, right? And you need to make the change in security group, because we will not modify NACL, because by default NACL rules will not allow all traffic. So no need to make any settings for NACL. Only you need to modify the security groups, as default NACL rule allows all traffic, right? So moving to next question. Your company has a set of EBS volumes and a set of adjoining EBS snapshots. They want to minimize the cost for the underlying EBS snapshots. Which of the following approaches provide the lowest cost of elastic store snapshot while giving you ability to fully restore data? So we want to maintain the lowest cost snapshot, right? As well as we want to have the ability to restore the data fully. So we can do that with the help of single incremental snapshots, right? Because we need to maintain a single snapshot, as the latest snapshot is both incremental and complete. So moving to next question, a company is planning on setting up a web-based application. They want to ensure that users across the world have the ability to view the pages from the website with the least amount of latency. How can you accomplish this? So in order to have the least amount of latency to access the web application, we have the thing called CloudFront, which we need to place in front of web application. So note that the same thing can be done for the database layer, but you need to add the elastic cache. Okay, so moving to next question, a company is hosting their company website on a cluster of web servers that are behind the public facing elastic load balancer. The customer also uses Amazon Route 53 to manage their public DNS. How should Route 53 be configured to ensure the custom domain is made to point to load balancer? So here we are trying to configure Route 53 in a way that our custom domain will face the load balancer, right? So for this we have to create this thing called alias for the CNAME record, right, to the load balancer DNS name, and we need to ensure that the hosted zone is in place. Okay, so moving to next question, a customer is hosting their company's website on a cluster of web servers that are behind a public facing load balancer. The web application interfaces with a AWS RDS database. The management has specified that the database is available in case of hardware failure on primary database. The secondary needs to be made available in the least amount of time, right? The secondary needs to be made available in the least amount of time. Which of the following would be the option for this scenario, right? So you would enable the multi-AZ failover, right? Because snapshot of database and grid replica are not suitable option, right? Because it would take more time than just enabling the multi-AZ. So multi-AZ is the suitable option for this kind of scenario where you want to protect from the failure of the primary database and you want the secondary database to be available in least time. So for that, multi-AZ is the best solution. Okay, so moving to next question, you are an architect for the company. Your IT administrator staff needs to access to newly created EC2 instances for administrative purposes. Which of the following needs to be done to ensure that IT administrator staff has successfully connected via port 22 on the EC2 instances? For this, you need to adjust the instance security group to permit ingress traffic over port 22 from your IP, right? So we have the scenario that how can your IT staff successfully connect through port 22 to the EC2 instances, right? So here you need to adjust your instance security group to permit ingress traffic over port 22 from your IP. Okay, a security group acts as a firewall that connects a security group acts as a firewall that controls the traffic from one or more instances. When you launch an instance, you associate one or more security group with the instances. You add rules to each security group that allow traffic to or from its associated instances. You work as an architect for the company. There is a requirement for an application to be deployed on a set of EC2 instances. These would be the part of compute cluster that require low internode latency. Which of the following would you use for this requirement? So, as you know that your compute cluster require the low internode latency, right? So you can do this with the cluster placement group, right? So what is cluster placement group? Cluster placement groups are recommended for applications that benefit for low network latency, high network throughput, or both. And if the majority of network traffic is between the instances in the group, right? Moving to next question. Your company stores a large set of files in Amazon S3. They need to ensure that if any new files are added to S3 bucket, and event notification would be sent to the IT administrator staff. Which of the following could be used to fulfill the requirement? So to send the notification, right, you need to create a SNS topic, and you need to add an event notification to the S3 bucket, right, not to an S3 object. This is the thing that you need to care about. Even so, you are storing the file in S3, so you need to add an event notification to S3 bucket, not S3 object. So moving to next question. Your company is planning on migrating some code from their on-premise infrastructure onto AWS. They want to ensure to limit the amount of maintenance that would be required for the underlying infrastructure. Which of the following would they choose for hosting the code base? So the company who is migrating the code from on-premise to AWS, who wants to limit the amount of maintenance through underlying infrastructure, we have the service called Lambda, right? So Lambda is a compute service that lets you run code without provisioning or managing servers. Okay, moving to next question. A company has an AWS account that contains 3 VPCs, that is development, test, and production in same region. There is a requirement to ensure that instances in the development and test VPC can access resources in production VPC for a limited amount of time. Which of the following would be the ideal way to get this in place, right? So let's look at the requirement. As we have 3 VPCs, that is development, test, and production, within the same region. Now we want our development VPC and test VPC to access the resources from the production VPC, right? So for that we need to create a separate VPC peering connection from development to production, right, and from test to production, right? So VPC pairing can be between your own VPC in same region, or within VPC in another region, or within another account, right? So moving to next question. You are designing an application architecture for a company. The architecture is going to consist of a web tier that will be hosted on the EC2 instances placed behind elastic load balancer. Which of the following would be considered important when considering what should the specification for the components of the application architecture be, right? So as we know, like the scenario, which says our web tier should be hosted on EC2 behind elastic load balancer, and we need to consider the components for the application architecture, right? So for this we need to determine the required input output operations, right? As well as we need to determine the minimum memory requirement for the application. So this is just a criteria what we need to do, right? We can know this by general thinking as well, right? So you need to decide on what are the requirements for the underlying EC2 instances. You can then choose the instance type for the underlying EC2 instance. Moving to next question. Your company is planning on moving to AWS cloud. There is a strict compliance policy that mandates the data should be encrypted at rest. As a solution architect, you have been tasked to put the organization data on the cloud and also ensure that all compliance requirements have been met. Which of the below needs to be a part of the implementation plan to ensure compliance with the security requirement? So for this you need to ensure that all EBS volumes are encrypted, and you need to ensure that the server side encryption is enabled for S3 bucket, right? So moving to next question. Your company currently has a set of virtual servers that need to be migrated to the AWS cloud. These instances are normally 70% utilized and used throughout most of the year. So what's model of instance pricing do you suggest, right? So note this thing. There's a 70% utilization and we use this throughout most of the year. Then we need to use reserved instance, right? So I'll tell like what are the instances that you need to use, right? For on-demand instances, it is pay by second for the instance that you launch, and the reserved instance you purchase at a significant discount, right? So instances that are always available for long term, right? For a term from 1 to 3 years. And scheduled instances, we can purchase instances that are always available on a specific recurring schedule for a 1 year term, right? And for spot instances, we can request unused EC2 instances which can lower your EC2 cost significantly. And for dedicated host, you pay for the physical host that is fully dedicated to the running of your instances and bring your existing per socket, per core or per VM software licenses to reduce cost. And for dedicated instances, we have pay by the hour for instance that run on the single tenant hardware. All right, now let's move to next question. You have a read intensive application hosted in AWS. The application is currently using the MySQL RDS feature in AWS. The CloudWatch matrices is showing high read throughput on the database and is causing performance issue on the database. Which of the following can be used to reduce the read throughput on the MySQL database? So you want to reduce the read throughput, right? For this you need to enable the read replica and offload the reads to the replica. So read replica is asynchronous replication for enhanced performance and durability of database instances, which is ideal storage mechanism which require high read throughput, right? So moving to next question. Your company is planning on setting up a VPC with private and public subnets and then hosting EC2 instances in the subnet. It has to be ensured that instances in the private subnet can download updates from the internet. Which of the following needs to be a part of the architecture for this requirement? So here we can see that our company is planning for a VPC with private and public subnet, right, and then hosting EC2 instances in the subnet, and it has ensured that instances in private subnet can download updates from the internet, right. So for this requirement, we have see this thing like it says the instances in private subnet can download updates from the internet. So this can be done with the help of NAT gateway, right. You I'm sorry, you can use a network address translation NAT gateway to enable instances in a private subnet to connect to the internet or other services, other AWS services, but prevent the internet from initiating a connection with those instances. When to use network load balancing, classic load balancing or application load balancing, right. So network load balancing supports network load balancing supports TCP, and our application load balancing supports STTP and ESTTPS. In network load balancing, source IP of the sender will be preserved, and in case of application load balancer, the source IP will be modified. In classic load balancer, the classic load balancer supports TCP, SSL, STTP and STTPS, and SSL offloading and path-based routing or host-based routing can be done using application load balancer. So application load balancer facilitates SSL offloading and path-based routing or host-based routing, right. And static IP address is only supported by network load balancer. So network load balancer only supports the static IP address, right. So moving to next question. Your company has an AWS account and a lot of resources defined in something reason. They want to track the resources to monitor if any charges are made to the resources. Which of the following should be used for this purpose? So to monitor if any charges are made for our resources, we have the service called AWS config. So it is a service that enables you to access, audit and evaluate the configuration of your AWS resources. Config continuously monitors and records your AWS resource configurations and allows you to automate the evaluation of recorded configuration against desired configuration. So moving to next question, we have a company which is planning on hosting an application with the below architecture, that is a Lambda function which reads metadata of the object from an ES3 bucket, and a Lambda function then stores the metadata in DynamoDB and AWS RDS MySQL. Which of the following needs to be in place to high availability of all components in the system? For this, we need to enable multi-AZ for the MySQL database, right? So multi-AZ RDS automatically provisions and maintains a synchronous standby replica in different regions. So moving to next question. Okay, so moving to next question, we have a company has a set of EC2 instances hosting a revenue generating application. Some of the data on the attached EVS volumes are critical to retain. Hence, it has to be ensured that even after the instance are terminated, the EVS volumes will still remain intact. Which of the following needs to be done to ensure this requirement can be met? So we want to make sure that even though our instance get terminated, the EVS volume will still remain intact, right? For this, we need to make the attribute of delete on termination for the EVS volume to false. When an instance is terminated, EC2 instance uses the value of delete on termination attribute for each attached EVS volumes to determine whether to preserve or delete the volume when the instance is terminated. By default, the delete on termination attribute for root volumes is set to true, but it is set to false for all other volume types. Moving to next question. A company has an application that needs to be hosted on an EC2 instances. The general amount of throughput data will be in the range of 400 to 500 MB per second from the application. Which of the following should be used as the storage type for the underlying EC2 instances for cost-effective manner? For this, you need to use throughput optimized SDD. So when you want high throughput, you should choose using the throughput optimized EVS volume, right? So moving to next question. Your company is currently hosting an application on on-premise environment. The company has developed this application in-house. Consulting companies then use the application via API calls. You now need to consider moving this application to AWS. Which of the following services would be best suited for this kind of architectural design, right? And as well as we want the cost-effective solution. For this, we have AWS Lambda and API Gateway, right? So as we can see the requirement that our company use application via API calls, right? So we use AWS API Gateway, and as we know, we are moving our on-premise application to AWS, and we can do this in less cost-effective way through the help of AWS Lambda, right? And moving to next question, we have a company that has an AWS Aurora cluster setup. They have set up a Lambda function which needs to insert records into a DynamoDB table. The Amazon Aurora cluster needs to invoke the Lambda as a stored procedure. Which of the following need to be in place for this setup to work? So for that, we need to ensure that Amazon Aurora cluster has an IAM role which allows it to invoke Lambda functions, and we need to allow Amazon Aurora cluster to allow outbound communication to Lambda function. So this is little tricky. Let's read the question again. It says a company has Aurora cluster setup. That's fine. They have set up a Lambda function, right, which needs to insert record. Now see this requirement. The Lambda function needs to be set up, which needs to create the insert records into the DynamoDB tables, right? And the Amazon cluster, Amazon Aurora cluster should be able to invoke the Lambda. So you can do this by ensuring the Aurora cluster has IAM role, right? So first you need to consider is IAM role, which allows to invoke Lambda functions, and second is you need to allow Amazon cluster for outbound communication to Lambda function, right? So moving to next question, your application consists of a set of EC2 instances which are spun up as part of auto scaling group. These instances need to access objects in S3 bucket. Which of the following is ideal approach to ensure this access is in place? So we have EC2 instances which is spun up as a part of auto scaling group, and we want these instances to access S3 bucket, right? So for this we need to ensure the auto scaling group attaches an IAM role attached to the underlying EC2 instances, right? So auto scaling group should attach IAM role attached to the underlying EC2 instances. Okay, moving to next question. You are an architect for the company that is going to be hosting an application in AWS. They want to load balance the traffic based on which route the user chooses. The two possible routes for the application are customers and orders. Which of the following would you include in this design? So we want to load balance upon the traffic but based on the route that the user chooses, right? So for this kind of scenario, right, we need to choose the application load balancer, not the classic load balancer, right? We need to choose application load balancer as the load balancer as the load balancer should happen upon the route that the user chooses, right? So moving to next question. Your company is planning on hosting an application that will be based on Docker containers. They need to set up an orchestration service that will automatically scale based on load. As much as possible, the company does not want the burden of managing the underlying infrastructure. Which of the following can assist in this scenario? For this, we can use ECS with service auto scaling. Your ECS can optionally be configured to use service auto scaling to adjust its desired count up or down in response to CloudWatch alarms. So service auto scaling leverages the application auto scaling service to provide this functionality, right? Moving to next question. Your team is developing Lambda functions. These functions would need to interact with databases belonging to different environment. Which of the following is ideal approach to ensuring that the Lambda functions are designed in the right way to interact with the databases in multiple environments? So for this, you need to make use of environment variable to store the database connection strings, right? So see the question here, right? You are developing the Lambda function, and this function needs to interact the databases belonging to different environment, right? And you want the ideal approach for ensuring Lambda functions are designed in the right way which interacts databases in multiple environments. So you want to interact database in multiple environment, then you need to use environmental variables to store the database connection strings. Environmental variables for Lambda function enables you to dynamically pass settings to your function code and libraries function code and libraries without making changes to your code. Right? Moving to next question. A company is planning to store sensitive documents in the S3 bucket. They want to ensure that documents are encrypted at rest. They want to ensure that they manage the underlying keys which are used for encryption, right? So for this purpose, we need to use S3 server-side encryption with customer keys, because we can see that they want to manage the underlying keys, right? So we need to use server-side encryption with customer keys, or we can use S3 client-side encryption, right? Client-side encryption is the act of encrypting data before sending to S3. To enable client-side encryption, use an AWS KMS managed customer master key and use a client-side master key, right? So we have a company which requirement is to monitor API activity for the audit processes for their AWS account. This audit would be conducted in the future as well and should be applicable to all regions. How would you design your solution to meet present and future needs? So for this, you need to ensure one cloud trial log is enabled for all regions, right? So moving to next question. A company is currently hosting an application which connects to MySQL AWS RDS instances. Of late, there have been many performance issues being encountered. After careful analysis, it has been determined that the issues is occurring as a result of similar queries being fired against the database. Which of the following can be added to the architecture to alleviate the performance issue? So here you have the performance issue, right? You have the performance issue and you have the result of similar queries that are being fired against the database. So for this, you need to use elastic case service in front of database, right? RDS. So moving to next question. We have a company that has a set of EC2 instances hosting a custom based application which is listening to port 3308. All of a sudden, there seems to be a barrage of requests coming in from a source IP address of 52.0.9.10. Which of the following can be used to stop requests from entering the VPC from your IP address? So to stop the VPC from entering the IP address, we have network ACL. So NACL is an optional layer of security for your VPC that acts as a firewall for controlling traffic in and out of one or more subnets. You might set up NACL with rules similar to your security group in order to add an additional layer of security. Security group is not suitable option because it can allow but also deny traffic. Security group is not suitable option because it only allow but not deny traffic. So you need not to add any rule for the deny of traffic in the security group, right? Because we can see that our security group will only allow and it will not deny any traffic, right? So moving to next question, we have moving to next scenario, we have VPC flow logs, which is not suitable for this option because It can be used for monitoring your network traffic into the VPC, right? So VPC flow log is for monitoring your network traffic in your VPC. And moving to another scenario, we have CloudTrail. It's not suitable for this option because it's used for API monitoring, right? So moving to next question, your company is planning to store sensitive documents in the bucket in S3. They need to ensure that all objects are encrypted at rest in the bucket. Which of the following can help you to accomplish this? For this, you need to ensure that default encryption is enabled for S3 bucket, and you need to ensure to change the configuration of the bucket to use KMS key to encrypt the objects, right? So to store sensitive, you are storing the sensitive documents to S3 bucket and you want to have it encrypted at rest, then you need to ensure the default encryption is enabled, and you need to also ensure the configuration of bucket to use KMS keys to encrypt the objects. Okay, you have 3 mutually exclusive options depending on how you choose on managing the encryption keys. Use server-side encryption with Amazon S3 managed keys, that is SSE S3. So for it is used if each object is encrypted with a unique key employing strong multi-factor encryption. As an additional safeguard, it encrypts the key itself with the master key that it regularly rotates, right? So it keeps on changing. And we can use server-side encryption with AWS KMS managed key service, so that is SSE KMS. So similar to SSE S3, but with some additional benefits along with some additional charges for using the service, right? And you can use server-side encryption with customer provided keys, that is SSEC. You manage the encryption keys and Amazon S3 manages the encryption as it writes to disks and decryption when you access your objects, right? So moving to next question, your company has a series of websites hosted in AWS. They need to ensure that users from the Europe region are directed to the website www.demo.com for regulatory purpose, right? Which of the following can help this regard? So as you need to ensure users from one region are directed to the something website like www.demo.com, then you need to use the Route 53 service, right? Geolocation routing lets you choose the resources that serve your traffic based on the geographical location of the users, meaning the location of DNS queries originate from. For example, you might want all queries from Europe to be routed to an elastic load balancer in another region, right? So moving to next question, we have a company that is planning to host an active site. One site will be located in AWS and the other one on their on-premise data center. They need to ensure the traffic is distributed accordingly between both the sites. Which of the following routing policy would you use for this purpose? So we will use weighted routing, as weighted routing lets you to associate multiple resources with a single domain name or subdomain name, that is example.com or something.example.com, and we can choose how much traffic is routed for each resources, right? This is useful for a variety of purposes, including the load balancing and testing new versions of software. A customer needs to access a service provided by a consultant company. The service from the consultant company and the application of the primary company exist in AWS VPC. The VPCs are located in different regions. How can you accomplish this connectivity, ensuring that the traffic does not pass via the internet? So for this you need to create a VPC pairing between VPCs in primary company and the consultant company, right? So see, first we have the requirement, right, that our company needs to access the service provided by the consultant company, and the service from the consultant company and the application of the primary company exist in AWS VPC, but VPC are located in different region. So we need to create a VPC pairing between VPC in primary company and the consultant company account, and we need to create a direct connect in the primary company's account, right? Create a private virtual interface to the VPC in the consultant company account. So we need to create direct connect in primary company account and private virtual interface to the VPC in consultant company account. So VPC pairing connection is a network connection between two VPC that enables you to route traffic between them privately, and direct connects makes it more easy to establish the dedicated network connection from on-premise to AWS. So we have an application, moving to next question, we have an application that needs to set up on AWS. It consists of several components. Two primary components are required to run for 3 hours every day. The other components are required every day for more than 6 to 8 hours. Which of the following would you use to ensure costs are minimized for underlying EC2 instances? So for this you will use on-demand instances for primary components, and for the remaining you will use reserved instances, right? Because for on-demand you are using 3 hours every day, right? And for the reserved instance you are using for more than 6 to 8 hours, which is so for this requirement we'll use reserved instances, right? So reserved instance provide you with the significant discount compared to on-demand instance pricing. So when you are doing more operation for more hours, then reserved instance would be better if you are doing it for the long period of time, right? So moving to next question, you have currently contacted an AWS partner to carry out an audit for your AWS account. You need to ensure that partner can carry out an audit of your AWS resources. Which one of the following steps would you ideally carry out? So let's look at the requirement that we have currently contacted an AWS partner to carry audit for our AWS account, right? So for this scenario we can carry audit by creating a cross account IAM role. Cross account IAM role allows customers to securely grant access to AWS resources in their account to a third party like a APN partner, while retaining the ability to control and audit who is accessing their AWS account, right? Moving to next question, your company is planning on setting up an application that will connect on the presentation layer and data store in DynamoDB. The data in DynamoDB will only be used frequently within the week in which the data is inserted. After the week, the data would tend to become stale, but the stale data would need to be available on durable storage for future analysis. So see, even though the data will be stored as stale later on for future analysis. We need those data for we might need those data for future, right? So for this scenario, as we are using DynamoDB as a data store layer, we need to set up DynamoDB tables on the weekly basis, and we need to ensure that most recent week tables has a higher throughput setup, and we need to use the data pipeline service to transfer the older data to ES3, right? First, we need to set up data tables on the weekly basis. We need to ensure most recent week tables has a higher throughput setup, and we will use the AWS data pipeline service to transfer the older data to ES3. So data pipeline is a web service that you can use to automate the movement and transformation of data. A company is going to set up an application that will be based on Docker based containers. The container will be set up in the ECS. You need to also set up load balancing for the underlying services, which are based on the dynamic port values. Which of the following would be the ideal service to use these purposes, right? So as the requirement is to set the load balancing for the underlying services based on the dynamic port values, right? We can do that with the help of application load balancer, right? Application, and we can see we are using the Docker based containers, and application load balancer offers the several features that make them attractive for the use with Amazon ECS service, right? So moving to next question, you currently have an architecture which consists of a set of web server in the public subnet and database server in the private subnet along with NAT instance. The NAT instance is now becoming a bottleneck, and you are looking to replace it with the NAT gateway. Which of the following would ensure a high availability setup for the NAT device? So for that, you need to deploy the NAT gateway in two availability zone, because if you have resources in multiple availability zone and they share one NAT gateway, in the event the NAT gateway availability zone is down, resources in another availability zone will lose the internet access. So moving to our last question in this part 5, your company is planning on setting up an application with the following architecture, that is a set of EC2 instances hosting a web application. The application that will sit behind an elastic load balancer, and the users will access the application from the internet via the elastic load balancer, and the application will connect to the backend database server, right? And we have the NAT gateway which is also implemented. So among this scenario, which of the following architecture is the will help for the high availability, right? So for that, we need to have two public subnet for elastic load balancer, two private subnet for web server EC2 instances, and two private subnet for database layer. So we might this two private subnet for web server might seem little strange, but there's the logic in here. So you need to have public subnet for elastic load balancer to ensure traffic that can flow via the internet. So this is okay. And the web server can be in the private subnet. See, the web server can be in the private subnet, since the communication between the instances and the elastic load balancer happens via the private IP. So here's the scenario, that's the communication between the instances and the elastic load balancer will happen via the private IP. So we do not require the public subnet in here, right? So and finally the database will have the private subnet at it do not want to communicate to the internet, right? But for elastic, for the web server, we can place the private subnet, since communication can happen between the instances and the elastic load balancer will happen via the private IP itself, right? Okay, so that's it. Thank you guys.